So imagine a $50 million auditorium.
Okay.
Like a stadium-sized place. It has a professional-grade coffee roastery, a state-of-the-art childcare center, and, a lighting rig that legitimately rivals a major rock tour.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of production.
It is. Now imagine that massive, sprawling complex just sitting completely empty.
Right.
With a giant for sale sign staked into the perfectly manicured lawn.
It's a crazy visual.
Right, because for decades, the American megachurch was arguably like the fastest growing social institution in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're looking at this foundational shift happening right under our noses. That supposedly unshakable foundation is, well, it's cracking. So welcome to today's Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission for this session is to examine a massive, almost seismic structural collapse that is currently reshaping our cultural landscape.
Yeah. And what makes this analysis so compelling is that it looks past the surface level drama,
Yeah, completely.
It examines the actual mechanics, like it breaks down the specific systems that built these massive institutions in the first place, and then explores why those exact same systems are currently dismantling them.
It is a brilliant breakdown.
Oh.
And the contrast is what immediately grabbed my attention.
Right.
We are watching an unstoppable force of exponential growth just hit a sudden, immovable wall.
Yeah, but before we dive into the data, let's establish our parameters for this deep dive.
Good idea.
We are taking a highly objective look at the mechanics, the history, and the systems of a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
We are not evaluating theology, we aren't taking sides or, chasing internet outrage.
No, not at all.
We're analyzing this purely through a sociological and structural lens, looking at how human beings organize, scale, and eventually abandon large-scale systems.
Exactly. Because whether you spend every Sunday morning in a pew or, you've never stepped foot inside a sanctuary in your life, the mechanics of how we build and abandon massive institutions affects you.
Absolutely.
To understand why this model is breaking down, we have to look at what it was at its absolute peak.
Right.
And peak means an operation meticulously designed to serve tens of thousands of people every single week.
The scope was entirely unprecedented. I mean, the source outlines how these locations effectively became the modern town square.
Yeah.
We are not talking about a large room with some stained glass and a wooden pulpit.
No.
They engineered an entire self-sustaining ecosystem. For millions of people across sprawling suburban communities, this was the undisputed center of gravity for their social, spiritual, and even economic lives.
Oh, totally. I mean, you had full-service commercial coffee shops, expansive bookstores, comprehensive childcare programs.
Counseling services, too.
Right, professional counseling services, and worship productions that required literal stadium logistics. But the video describes a very jarring present-day reality.
It does.
Across the United States, several of these once unstoppable juggernauts are actively shrinking.
Right.
They are aggressively consolidating their satellite campuses, and they are quietly selling off massive parcels of commercial property just to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta say, I struggle a bit with the underlying premise here.
Okay, how so?
Well, if an organization owns the land, right, and they own these massive buildings that provide literally everything a community could want, from your morning latte to taking care of your kids, shouldn't they be insulated from a total collapse?
You would think so.
Right. Like, why can't they just downsize their staff, keep the buildings, and ride it out? Why is owning a massive community center suddenly a crushing burden instead of a huge asset?
What's fascinating here is the unseen mathematical reality of institutional overhead.
Okay.
When an organization positions itself to function as a modern town square, it assumes massive commercial liabilities.
Oh.
Maintaining concert-level production gear, running multiple commercial-grade HVAC systems for a 10,000-seat auditorium.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
The air conditioning bill alone.
Exactly. And staffing a vast network of social services isn't just a one-time construction cost. It requires a staggeringly high, continuous influx of weekly capital.
Okay, so the fixed costs remain sky high regardless of how many people actually show up.
Exactly.
It feels exactly like looking at the phenomenon of dead shopping malls.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Like, a mall relies on massive anchor stores like a Macy's or a Sears to bring in the sheer volume of foot traffic.
Right.
That massive foot traffic is what subsidizes the smaller food courts and the boutique shops.
Okay.
If the anchor store leaves, the foot traffic evaporates and the whole ecosystem starves. In this scenario, it sounds like the anchor store is simply institutional trust.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Institutional trust is the anchor that drives Sunday attendance. When an institution of that staggering size begins to lose trust with the public, the effects do not stay confined to the sanctuary.
Wow.
They ripple through the entire ecosystem. The moment trust falters, the attendance drops.
Right.
When attendance drops, weekly revenue drops. But the property taxes, the commercial utility bills, and the maintenance costs on that massive childcare wing do not drop.
Oh, man.
Suddenly, those community assets become financial anchors, dragging the entire institution underwater.
So the scale itself becomes the weapon of its own undoing.
Exactly.
When the revenue becomes highly variable, but the overhead is permanently fixed, collapse isn't just a possibility. It becomes a mathematical inevitability.
Yep.
But, how did we even get to a point where religious institutions were building commercial infrastructure on that scale?
Well, to understand the collapse, we have to look backward at the genesis of this massive growth.
Okay.
And the source takes us away from these modern multi-million-dollar stadium auditoriums all the way back to a literal parking lot in the 1950s.
Right, a drive-in theater in Southern California, to be exact.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the visual of a parking lot full of cars honking at a pastor is incredibly quirky.
Yeah, very quirky.
It's brilliant, but it completely upends the standard historical narrative.
How so?
Well, you usually assume that massive religious movements are sparked by some grand, sweeping theological shift.
Right.
But the foundational DNA of the polished modern megachurch was basically just a localized adaptation to 1950s post-war car culture.
It was a revolution in the delivery mechanism, not necessarily the message. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Schuler's drive-in church proved a highly scalable idea.
Okay.
It demonstrated that if an institution is willing to seamlessly adapt its delivery to match modern consumer culture, it can remove the traditional barriers to entry.
They met the consumer exactly where they were.
Exactly.
In the driver's seat. They looked at the post-war American family, realized they loved the newly discovered convenience of their cars, and said, great, we'll bring the institution to your windshield.
Precisely. It divorced the concept of gathering from traditional, rigid, historical architecture and wedded it to contemporary cultural convenience.
Right.
By revolutionizing the delivery system, they dramatically reduced the friction of attendance for the modern family. They made it incredibly easy to participate.
But once you reduce that friction
Right.
and remove the traditional ceiling on how people gather, you run into a totally new logistical problem.
Which is?
Where do you physically put all of these people?
Oh, exactly.
And that is where the growth numbers just go completely off the charts.
If this kind of analysis helps you see the bigger picture, you'll want to stay connected with Voice of Insight. We don't chase outrage here. We examine systems, because the next story is already unfolding. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel.